They laughed at her and called security, but they didn't know her boss was George Strait. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine marble floors of the Strait mansion in San Antonio, Texas, as Maria Gonzalez carefully arranged. Fresh white roses in the crystal vase that had been Norma Strait's favorite for over 2 decades. Her weathered hands, marked by 25 years of devoted service, moved with the practiced grace of someone who had transformed a house into a home through countless small acts of love and dedication. At 58, Maria carried herself with quiet dignity, her silver-streaked hair always neatly pulled back, her uniform pressed to perfection despite the modest income that had never allowed for luxuries. The sound of boots clicking against the hardwood announced George Strait's approach before she even turned around. After all these years, she could identify his footsteps from 3 rooms away, distinguish his thoughtful pace from his hurried one. And today she sensed something different in his rhythm, something that spoke of excitement barely contained beneath his characteristically calm exterior. "Maria, I need to talk to you about something special," George said, his voice carrying that warm Texas drawl that had made him the undisputed king of country music. He held an envelope in his hands, thick with documents, and his blue eyes sparkled with the same mischief she had witnessed whenever he planned surprises for his beloved wife, Norma. Maria set down the vase and turned to face him, her hands automatically smoothing her apron. "Of course, Mr. Strait. What can I do for you?" "In 3 weeks, Norma and I will celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary," George began, settling into the leather armchair that had been his refuge during countless late-night songwriting sessions. 50 years, Maria. Can you believe it? Sometimes it feels like yesterday when I first brought her to this house, and sometimes it feels like we've been together forever. If you're watching this story unfold and thinking about the people who have been loyal pillars in your own life, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Please subscribe to our channel and share where you're watching from. Your stories of loyalty and unexpected recognition matter just as much as Maria's. Now, let's see what George has planned for this incredible woman who has been the silent foundation of his family's happiness. The afternoon light streaming through the tall windows caught the genuine emotion in George's eyes as he continued. "I've been planning something special for weeks now. You know how she's been admiring that new Mercedes-Benz GLE every time we drive past the dealership? The pearl white one with the leather interior she keeps mentioning?" Maria nodded, remembering the subtle way Norma's eyes would linger on the elegant vehicle during their weekly trips to the grocery store. After so many years of observing the Strait family, she had learned to notice the small details that spoke volumes about their hearts and desires. "Well, I want to surprise her with it," George said, his voice gaining enthusiasm. "But here's the thing. I leave for my tour tomorrow, and I won't be back until 2 days before the anniversary. The timing is terrible, but the tour dates were set months ago, and thousands of people have already bought tickets." Maria watched as George opened the envelope and spread its contents across the coffee table. Official documents, financial authorizations, and what appeared to be a cashier's check for a substantial amount. The sight of so much money made her stomach flutter with nervousness. "I've already spoken with the dealership manager and selected the exact model," George continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Everything is arranged, but someone needs to go there in person to finalize the purchase and make sure everything is perfect for the surprise. The car needs to be delivered on the morning of our anniversary with a big red bow, just like in those commercials Norma loves." The weight of what he was asking began to settle on Maria's shoulders. She had managed household budgets, coordinated with contractors, and handled countless responsibilities for the Strait family. But this felt different. This felt enormous. "Maria, I trust you more than anyone else in this world to handle this." George said, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "You've been with us through everything. The good times, the challenging times, the moments when fame felt overwhelming, and the moments when it felt like a blessing. You've seen how much Norma means to me, and you understand what this anniversary represents." Maria's throat tightened with emotion. She remembered the early days when George's career was just beginning to take off, when Norma would worry about him being away for weeks at a time, when the pressures of the music industry threatened to change the man she had fallen in love with. She had witnessed their arguments and their reconciliations, their laughter and their tears, and through it all, she had been the constant presence that kept their household running smoothly. "I know this is a big responsibility," George continued, gathering the documents and placing them back in the envelope. "The car costs $73,000. I've included my corporate credit card, my personal authorization letter, and my driver's license copy. The dealership is expecting someone from my office, and I've already called to let them know my representative will be coming to complete the transaction." The number made Maria's breath catch. $73,000 was more money than she had ever seen in one place, more than she could earn in 3 years of her current salary. The magnitude of George's trust in her was both humbling and terrifying. "Mr. Strait, I am honored that you would trust me with something so important," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But are you sure? This is such a significant purchase, and I've never bought anything so expensive in my entire life." George stood up and walked over to where Maria was standing, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Maria, in 25 years, you have never once let this family down. You have never once betrayed our trust or failed to complete a task we've given you. You've been more than an employee. You've been family, and family looks out for each other." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Maria's eyes. She thought about her own modest life, her small apartment across town, her aging Honda Civic that needed repairs she couldn't afford. She thought about her grown children who had moved away, pursuing their own dreams, and how her work with the Strait family had become not just her livelihood, but her purpose. "Besides," George added with a gentle smile, "I've already arranged for you to have tomorrow off to handle this. Consider it a paid day to help me create the perfect surprise for the woman who has put up with me for 50 years. Maria carefully took the envelope from George's hands, feeling the weight of the responsibility he was placing in her care. "What time should I go to the dealership?" "They open at 9, but I'd suggest going around 10:30. That gives you time to dress nicely and prepare yourself for dealing with those fancy salespeople. You know how they can be, all polished and intimidating. But remember, you're representing me, and you have every right to be there." As George prepared to leave for his tour, Maria spent the evening carefully reviewing every document in the envelope. She ironed her best dress, a navy blue outfit she had worn to her nephew's wedding 2 years ago. She polished her modest black shoes and chose her simple pearl earrings, the ones her late mother had left her. She wanted to look respectable, professional, worthy of the trust George had placed in her. That night she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the next day's mission. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours she would face the most humiliating experience of her life, an experience that would test every ounce of dignity she had spent 58 years building. She had no idea that the very trust George had shown her would be questioned, mocked, and dismissed by people who saw only her appearance and made assumptions about her worth. But she also had no idea that this experience would ultimately lead to one of the most powerful demonstrations of loyalty, respect, and justice that San Antonio had ever witnessed. The morning air carried the familiar scent of Texas summer heat. As Maria stood before her small bathroom mirror, adjusting her navy blue dress for the 3rd time, Her hands trembled slightly as she applied a touch of lipstick, a luxury she rarely indulged in. The envelope containing George's trust lay on her kitchen table, its contents representing more responsibility than she had ever carried in her life. The drive to the Mercedes-Benz dealership in downtown San Antonio felt longer than usual in her 15-year-old Honda Civic. The car's air conditioning had stopped working months ago, and she couldn't afford the repair, so she drove with the windows down, hoping the wind wouldn't completely ruin her carefully arranged hair. With each mile that passed, her nervousness grew, but so did her determination to honor George's faith in her. The dealership appeared before her like a palace of glass and chrome. The building stretched across an entire city block, its floor to ceiling, windows reflecting the morning sun like mirrors. Inside, she could see rows of pristine vehicles, each one worth more than she had ever imagined owning. The contrast between her modest Honda and the luxury cars surrounding the building was stark, but Maria reminded herself of George's words, "You're representing me, and you have every right to be there." As she parked her car in the customer lot, Maria noticed how other vehicles seemed to dwarf her Honda. Luxury sedans, sports cars, and SUVs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars sat like jewels in their designated spaces. A well-dressed couple emerged from a gleaming BMW, the woman's designer handbag alone probably costing more than Maria's monthly rent. Taking a deep breath, Maria gathered her purse and the envelope, checking one more time that all the documents were secure. She had memorized every detail of the transaction: Mercedes-Benz GLE 450, pearl white exterior, beige leather interior, premium package, $73,000. The numbers felt foreign in her mouth, but she repeated them like a prayer. The automatic doors of the dealership whooshed open, and Maria stepped into a world that seemed designed to intimidate. The showroom floor stretched before her like a museum, each vehicle positioned under perfectly angled lights that made them gleam like works of art. The floor was polished marble, so clean she could see her reflection in it. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers, and the air smelled of leather and expensive cologne. For the first 20 minutes, Maria felt invisible. She walked slowly between the vehicles, stopping occasionally to admire their craftsmanship, waiting for someone to approach her. She watched as salespeople in immaculate suits glided across the floor, greeting other customers with warm smiles and enthusiastic handshakes. A middle-aged man in a polo shirt and khaki pants was immediately surrounded by 3 salespeople, all competing for his attention. A young woman in designer clothes was escorted to a comfortable seating area and offered coffee, while a salesperson who brought her brochures. But Maria remained unnoticed. She cleared her throat softly as a salesperson walked past her, but he seemed not to hear. She positioned herself near the GLE models, hoping someone would approach and ask if she needed assistance. She even made eye contact with a saleswoman, who glanced at her briefly before turning to help a customer who had just walked in. The feeling of being overlooked was familiar to Maria. Throughout her life, she had grown accustomed to being the background presence, the one who made things happen without being seen. But today was different. Today, she was here on behalf of George Strait, and she had a job to do. Finally, she spotted a man who appeared to be in charge. He was tall, probably in his early 40s, with perfectly styled hair and a suit that looked like it cost more than her car. A name tag on his lapel read, "Brett Thompson, Sales Manager." He was standing near the service desk reviewing paperwork with an air of authority that made other employees defer to him. Maria approached him with measured steps, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "Excuse me, sir. I'm here to finalize the purchase of a Mercedes-Benz GLE 450 that has already been reserved by Mr. George Strait." Brett looked up from his papers, his eyes scanning Maria from head to toe in a way that made her feel like she was being evaluated and found wanting. His expression shifted from professional politeness to barely concealed amusement. "George Strait, the singer." "He?" asked, his voice carrying a tone of disbelief. "Yes, sir. Mr. Strait sent me to complete the transaction," Maria said, extending the envelope toward him. "I have all the necessary documents and authorization right here." Brett's reaction was immediate and devastating. A smile spread across his face, but it wasn't the warm, welcoming smile she had seen him give other customers. This was something else entirely, condescending, mocking, designed to make her feel small. "Ma'am, I think there might be some confusion here. The vehicle you're talking about costs $73,000. Are you sure you're in the right place?" The words stung, but Maria maintained her composure. "Sir, Mr. Strait specifically asked me to come here to finalize this purchase. I have his corporate credit card, his signed authorization, and all the necessary documentation." By now, other salespeople had begun to notice the interaction. Maria could see them exchanging glances, some trying to hide smiles behind their hands. A young salesman named Jake Martinez whispered something to his colleague, who stifled a laugh. The atmosphere in the showroom began to shift, the classical music suddenly seeming too loud, the polished surfaces reflecting her discomfort back at her. "Let me guess," Brett said, his voice now loud enough for others to hear. "You're the housekeeper?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Maria felt the heat rise to her cheeks. "I work for the Strait family, yes," Maria replied with dignity, though her voice was barely above a whisper. "The housekeeper," Brett repeated, looking around at his colleagues who had gathered closer to witness the exchange. "And George Strait, one of the most successful country music artists in history, sent his housekeeper to buy a $73,000 car." The humiliation was beginning to feel overwhelming, but Maria pressed on. "Sir, if you would just look at the documents, you'll see that everything is in order. Mr. Strait has been planning this surprise for his wife for weeks." Brett took the envelope from Maria's hands with exaggerated ceremony, making a show of examining its contents. He held up the credit card, studying it as if it were a foreign object. "This could be stolen," he said loudly. "Anyone could have. These documents. Do you have any idea how many people try to commit fraud using celebrity names?" The words hit Maria like physical blows. Around her, she could hear the whispers of other customers and employees, all eyes now focused on the unfolding drama. A well-dressed woman near the luxury sedan section leaned over to her companion and whispered something that made them both laugh. "Sir, I assure you these documents are genuine," Maria said, her voice growing stronger despite her embarrassment. "I have worked for the Strait family for 25 years. Mr. Strait trusts me with his home, his family, and now with this important purchase." 25 years? Brett's voice dripped with sarcasm. "And in all that time, he never thought to send someone more appropriate, to handle a transaction of this magnitude." The cruelty of the comment made Maria's eyes fill with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "Mr. Strait chose me because he trusts me. I am here to do a job, and I intend to do it." Brett handed the envelope back to Maria with a dismissive gesture. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We don't have time for games here, and frankly, your presence is making other customers uncomfortable." The injustice of the statement made Maria's voice shake with emotion. "I am not playing games. I am here on legitimate business, representing a valued customer who has specifically requested this vehicle for his wife's anniversary gift." "Security," Brett called out, his voice carrying across the showroom. "We have a situation here." The word security echoed through the elegant space like a gunshot. Conversations stopped, heads turned, and Maria felt the weight of dozens of judgmental stares. A uniformed security guard appeared from somewhere in the back of the dealership, his presence making the situation feel suddenly serious and threatening. "This woman is claiming to represent George Strait," Brett explained to the guard, his tone suggesting that the very idea was absurd. "She has documents that could be forged, and she's insisting on purchasing a $73,000 vehicle. I think it's best if she leaves before this goes any further." The security guard, a middle-aged man with kind eyes who seemed uncomfortable with the situation, approached Maria gently. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." The walk to the exit felt like the longest journey of Maria's life. Every step echoed against the marble floor. Every whisper from the watching crowd felt like a dagger to her heart. She had never felt so small, so invisible, so completely dismissed based on nothing more than her appearance and her station in life. But as she reached the door, something inside her refused to accept defeat. She turned back to face Brett Thompson, her voice clear and strong despite the tears that threatened to fall. "Mr. Thompson, you have made a terrible mistake today. And I promise you this is not over." The automatic doors closed behind her with a soft whoosh, sealing her out of the world of luxury and privilege she had briefly tried to enter. Standing in the Texas heat beside her old Honda, Maria pulled out, her phone with shaking hands. There was only one person who could make this right, and she prayed he would answer. The phone rang 3 times before George Strait's familiar voice came through the speaker. "Maria, how did everything go at the dealership?" The concern in his voice immediately broke through the last of Maria's composure. 25 years of professional dignity crumbled as she tried to find words to explain what had just happened. "Mr. Strait, I'm so sorry. I tried to do what you asked, but they wouldn't listen to me." "Oh, what do you mean they wouldn't listen? Maria, what happened?" George's voice shifted from casual inquiry to sharp attention. He was sitting in the green room of Kilt radio station, having just finished promoting his upcoming tour dates. The DJ had stepped out for a commercial break, leaving George alone with his coffee and what he had expected to be a quick check-in call. "They said I was trying to commit fraud," Maria said, her voice breaking. "The sales manager, Mr. Thompson, he looked at me like I was some kind of criminal. He said the documents could be stolen, that anyone could have them. He called security and had me escorted out." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity. Maria could hear the sounds of the radio station in the background, muffled voices and the distant hum of equipment. When George finally spoke, his voice was different, harder, colder than she had ever heard it. "They called security on you?" Each word was measured, controlled, but Maria could hear the anger building beneath the surface. "Yes, sir, in front of everyone. There were other customers watching, and they all saw me being walked out like some kind of thief. I showed them all the documents, the credit card, your authorization letter, everything you gave me. But they said I didn't look like someone who could afford such an expensive car." George stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor of the small radio station room. "Maria, I need you to tell me exactly what happened, every detail. Don't leave anything out." Through tears and stammering words, Maria recounted the entire humiliating experience. She described the 20 minutes of being ignored, the condescending looks from the sales staff, Brett Thompson's mocking questions about her being the housekeeper. She told him about the laughter from other customers, the way she had been treated, like she was invisible until she became a source of entertainment. "He asked if I was the housekeeper," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper, "and when I said yes, he made it sound like that was the most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. Like someone like me could never be trusted with something so important." With each detail, George's anger grew. He began pacing the small room, his boots clicking against the linoleum floor in a rhythm that matched his rising blood pressure. The radio station staff had seen George Strait perform for thousands of people, had watched him handle the pressures of fame and success with grace and humility, but they had never seen him truly angry. "Maria, I want you to go home and wait for me. Don't worry about anything else today. Just go home and take care of yourself." "But Mr. Strait, the car for Mrs. Norma's anniversary—" "Don't you worry about that car for 1 second," George interrupted, his voice firm. "That's not your concern anymore. This is about something much more important than a car. This is about respect and dignity and how people treat other people." After hanging up with Maria, George sat in the radio station's green room, staring at his phone. The DJ knocked on the door, ready to continue the interview, but George waved him away. "Give me 5 minutes," he said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. He scrolled through his contacts and found the number for the Mercedes-Benz dealership, when the receptionist answered with a cheerful "Mercedes-Benz of San Antonio. How can I help you?" George's response was immediate and direct. "I need to speak with your general manager immediately. This is George Strait." "Oh, Mr. Strait, of course, let me get Mr. Rodriguez for you right away." Carlos Rodriguez had been the general manager of the dealership for 12 years. He knew the value of celebrity customers, understood the importance of discretion and exceptional service. When his phone rang with George Strait on the line, he expected it to be a routine call about a vehicle purchase. "Mr. Strait, what a pleasure to hear from you. I understand you're interested in one of our GLE models for your wife's anniversary. Congratulations on 50 years of marriage, by the way." "Carlos, we need to talk, and we need to talk right. Now, one of your sales managers just humiliated my employee in front of your entire showroom. He accused her of fraud, called security, and had her escorted out like a common criminal." The tone in George's voice made Carlos's blood run cold. "Mr. Strait, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Let me check with my sales team." "Don't check with anyone. I'm telling you what happened. A woman named Maria Gonzalez came to your dealership this morning with my complete authorization to purchase a vehicle. She had my corporate credit card, my signed documents, and my full authority to complete the transaction. Instead of treating her with respect, your sales manager, Brett Thompson, decided to judge her based on her appearance and her accent." Carlos was already pulling up the morning sales reports on his computer, but he wasn't finding any record of the transaction. George was describing, "Mr. Strait, I don't see any record of a completed sale." "Because there wasn't one." George's voice rose for the first time. "Because your employee was too busy being prejudiced to do his job. Maria Gonzalez has worked for my family for 25 years. She has access to my home, my personal belongings, my family's private information. I trust her with everything I have, and your sales manager treated her like she was trying to steal from you." The implications of what George was saying began to sink in for Carlos. A major celebrity customer was calling to complain about discrimination at his dealership. This wasn't just about a lost sale. This was about the reputation of his business, the integrity of his staff, and potentially serious legal consequences. "Mr. Strait, I sincerely apologize for whatever happened. I can assure you that this doesn't represent the values of our dealership. If you'll give me a few minutes, I'll investigate this immediately and call you back." "No, Carlos, I'm not waiting for you to investigate. I'm 15 minutes away from your dealership right now, and I'm coming over there personally. And when I arrive, I expect to find Brett Thompson still on your premises, because he and I are going to have a conversation about respect and dignity." George hung up the phone and walked out of the radio station, ignoring the DJ's protests about the unfinished interview. His tour manager, Tommy, was waiting in the parking lot, scrolling through his phone. "Tommy, change of plans. We're going to the Mercedes dealership downtown." "The dealership? I thought Maria was handling that today." "She tried to, but apparently they decided she wasn't good enough for their fancy showroom." George's voice was tight, with controlled fury. "Get in the truck. We're going to go teach some people about Texas hospitality." Tommy had worked with George for over a decade, had seen him handle difficult situations with grace and professionalism. But the look in George's eyes right now was something he had never seen before. This wasn't about a car anymore. This was personal. As they drove through downtown San Antonio, George called his publicist, his lawyer, and his business manager. By the time they reached the dealership, word was already spreading through the music industry about what had happened. Social media managers were being alerted, crisis communication plans were being activated, and the story of Maria's humiliation was about to become much bigger than anyone at the dealership could have imagined. Meanwhile, back at the dealership, Carlos Rodriguez was having the most difficult conversation of his career with Brett Thompson. The sales manager stood in the general manager's office. His earlier confidence completely evaporated as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. "You called security on George Strait's representative?" Carlos's voice was deadly quiet. "I didn't know she was legitimate," Brett stammered. "She looked like... she didn't seem like someone who could afford." "She didn't look like what, Brett? She didn't look rich enough? She didn't look white enough? She didn't look like your idea of what a Mercedes customer should look like?" The accusations hung in the air between them, and Brett realized that his career was probably over. "Carlos, I was just trying to protect the dealership from fraud. We've had problems with people using fake documents before." "Did you examine her documents?" "Well, I glanced at them, but..." "Did you run the credit card?" "No, but did you call the bank to verify the account?" "I didn't have time." "You didn't have time to do your job, but you had time to humiliate a customer in front of the entire showroom?" Carlos's voice was rising now. "Brett, in 12 years of managing this dealership, I have never been more disappointed in an employee." Through the office window, Carlos could see unusual activity in the parking lot. Several vehicles were arriving, including what appeared to be a news van. His phone was ringing constantly with calls from reporters who had somehow already heard about the incident. "Sir," his assistant knocked on the door, "George Strait just pulled into the parking lot, and there are cameras with him." Carlos looked out the window to see George's distinctive black truck pulling up to the front entrance. Behind him were 2 other vehicles, and several people with cameras were getting out. The story was about to become very public, very quickly. "Brett, you're going to go out there, and you're going to apologize to that man, and to Maria Gonzalez. And then you're going to clean out your desk." "Carlos, please, I've been with the company for 8 years. And in 8 years, you never learned that every customer deserves respect. That treating people with dignity is more important than making assumptions based on their appearance." Carlos shook his head. "This isn't just about George Strait. Brett, this is about the kind of business we want to be." As George Strait walked through the front doors of the dealership, every conversation in the showroom stopped. The king of country music had arrived, and everyone knew that what happened next would change everything. The silence that fell over the Mercedes-Benz showroom was deafening. George Strait stood in the entrance, his presence commanding immediate attention from every person in the building. He was dressed simply, jeans, boots, and a button-down shirt, but there was an unmistakable authority in his posture that made everyone understand this was not a casual visit. Behind him, Tommy carried a briefcase and looked around the showroom with the practiced eye of someone who had handled difficult situations before. 2 local news crews had followed them into the parking lot, and through the glass windows, camera operators could be seen setting up their equipment. Carlos Rodriguez appeared from his office, his face pale but determined to handle the situation professionally. "Mr. Strait, welcome to our dealership. I'm Carlos Rodriguez, the general manager. I believe we spoke on the phone." George's eyes swept the showroom. taking in the faces of the sales staff who had witnessed Maria's humiliation just hours earlier. "Carlos, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me, but I'm not here to talk to you. I'm here to talk to Brett Thompson." "Mo." The mention of Brett's name caused a ripple of uncomfortable shifting among the employees. Several customers who had been browsing vehicles found themselves inadvertently drawn into the drama, unsure whether to leave or stay and witness what was clearly going to be a significant confrontation. "Mr. Strait, perhaps we could discuss this in my office privately," Carlos suggested, clearly hoping to contain the situation away from public view. "No, Carlos. What happened to Maria Gonzalez happened right here in this showroom, in front of all these people. If Brett Thompson can humiliate one of my family members publicly, then he can face the consequences publicly too." George's voice carried across the marble floor, and the word family resonated with particular emphasis. Several employees exchanged glances, realizing for the first time that this wasn't just about a business transaction. This was personal. Brett Thompson emerged from the back office, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. He looked like a man walking to his execution, his face flushed with embarrassment and fear. The sales manager, who had wielded his authority so carelessly just hours before now, appeared small and vulnerable. "Mr. Thompson," George said, his voice controlled but carrying an edge that made everyone in the showroom tense. "I believe you met my employee Maria Gonzalez this morning." "Yes, sir, I did." Brett's voice was barely audible. "And how did that meeting go?" Brett glanced around the showroom, aware that every eye was on him, including several customers who had stopped their browsing to watch the unfolding drama. "Sir, there was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" George's voice rose slightly. "Let me help you understand what happened. Maria Gonzalez, who has worked for my family for 25 years, who has keys to my home, who has helped raise my children, who has been trusted with every aspect of my personal life, came to your dealership with my complete authorization to purchase a vehicle for my wife's anniversary." George began walking slowly through the showroom as he spoke, his voice carrying to every corner of the space. "She came here with my corporate credit card, my signed authorization, and my complete trust. And instead of treating her with the respect that any customer deserves, you decided to judge her based on her appearance." Brett's face grew redder with each word. "Mr. Strait, I was trying to protect the dealership from potential fraud." "Fraud?" George stopped walking and turned to face Brett directly. "Did you examine her documents?" I looked at them." "Did you run the credit card to verify the account?" "No, sir, but..." "Did you call the bank to confirm the authorization?" "No, sir." "Did you do anything that would constitute actually investigating potential fraud, or did you just look at a 58-year-old Hispanic woman and decide she couldn't possibly be legitimate?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, and Brett's silence was answer enough. Several employees looked down at their feet, uncomfortable with the obvious implications of their colleagues' behavior. George's voice became softer but somehow more intense. "Brett, Maria Gonzalez is more than an employee to my family. She's been with us through deaths and births, through career highs and personal lows. She's held my grandchildren, comforted my wife during difficult times, and maintained our home with a dedication that most people couldn't understand." He paused, letting his words sink in. "When I needed someone to handle the most important gift I've ever given my wife, I chose Maria because I trust her judgment, her integrity, and her commitment to excellence. And you treated her like a criminal." Brett attempted to speak, but George wasn't finished. "You called security on her. You had her escorted out of your business like she was some kind of threat. You did this in front of other customers, in front of your staff, And you did it because you looked at her and made assumptions about her worth based on her appearance and her accent. The accusation of discrimination was now explicit, and everyone in the showroom understood the gravity of what was being discussed. Carlos Rodriguez looked increasingly uncomfortable, realizing that his dealership was at the center of what could become a major public relations disaster. "Mr. Strait, I sincerely apologize," Brett said, his voice shaking. "I made a mistake, and I'm sorry." "You're sorry?" George's voice carried a note of incredulity. "Brett, do you have any idea what you put that woman through? Do you understand what it feels like to be judged and dismissed based on nothing more than how you look?" George turned to address the entire showroom, his voice rising so that everyone could hear him clearly. "I want everyone here to understand something. The woman who was humiliated in this showroom this morning has more integrity in her little finger than some people have in their entire bodies. She has spent 25 years proving her worth through action, through dedication, through the kind of loyalty that can't be bought or faked." Several customers had taken out their phones and were recording the confrontation, realizing they were witnessing something significant. The news crews outside were pressing against the windows, capturing what they could of the scene inside. "And you," George pointed directly at Brett, "you decided that her 25 years of service, her impeccable character, and her complete authorization from me meant nothing because she didn't look like your idea of what a Mercedes customer should look like." Brett's face had gone from red to pale, and his hands were visibly shaking. "Mr. Strait, if I could just explain." "No, Brett, you've done enough explaining. You've shown everyone in this room exactly who you are and what you value. You've demonstrated that in your world, appearance matters more than character. Assumptions matter more than facts, and prejudice matters more than professionalism." George's voice became even more intense. "But here's what you didn't understand when you were busy humiliating Maria. You weren't just disrespecting her. You were disrespecting me, my family, and everything we stand for." He walked closer to Brett, his voice dropping to a level that was somehow more threatening than if he had been shouting. "I've built my career on treating people with respect, regardless of their background, their appearance, or their station in life. I've tried to use whatever platform I have to remind people that we're all human beings, deserving of dignity." George turned back to the crowd that had gathered. "And when someone treats one of my family members the way Maria was treated today, they're not just attacking her, they're attacking values that I've spent my entire life trying to promote." The silence in the showroom was absolute. Even the background music seemed to have stopped, leaving only the sound of George's voice echoing off the marble floors and glass walls. "Brett, I want you to understand something. This isn't about money, and it's not about cars. This is about the kind of society we want to live in. This is about whether we judge people by their character or by their appearance. This is about whether we treat service workers with respect or whether we dismiss them as somehow less worthy of courtesy." George's voice carried the weight of his years in the public eye, his experiences with both the best and worst of human nature. "I've met presidents and janitors, CEOs and farmhands, and I've learned that a person's worth has nothing to do with their job title or their bank account. It has everything to do with their character, their integrity, and their treatment of others." He looked directly at Brett again. "And today, Brett, you failed that test completely." Carlos Rodriguez stepped forward, clearly hoping to salvage something from the situation. "Mr. Strait, I want to assure you that Mr. Thompson's behavior doesn't represent the values of our dealership. We pride ourselves on treating all customers with respect." "Do you, Carlos?" George turned his attention to the general manager. "Because, from what I understand, Maria stood in this showroom for 20 minutes without a single person offering to help her. She watched other customers receive immediate attention while she was completely ignored. That doesn't sound like respect to me." The accusation expanded beyond just Brett, encompassing the entire sales staff who had witnessed Maria's treatment and done nothing to intervene. Several employees shifted uncomfortably, realizing their own complicity in the situation. "Mr. Strait," Carlos said, "I assure you that we will investigate this matter thoroughly and take appropriate action." "No, Carlos. The time for investigation is over. The time for action is now." George's voice carried a finality that made everyone understand this confrontation was reaching its conclusion. "I'm taking my business elsewhere, and I'm making sure that everyone knows exactly why." He turned to address the entire showroom. "One final time, I want everyone here to remember what happened today. I want you to remember that how you treat people matters. I want you to remember that respect isn't something you earn through wealth or status. It's something you give to every human being you encounter." George began walking toward the exit, but he paused at the door and turned back. "And Brett, I want you to remember Maria Gonzalez. I want you to remember that the woman you dismissed and humiliated today has more class, more dignity, and more worth than you showed her you possess." The automatic doors opened and George Strait walked out of the dealership, leaving behind a silence that seemed to echo with the weight of his words. Behind him, Brett Thompson stood in the middle of the showroom, his career effectively over, while Carlos Rodriguez contemplated the damage that had been done to his business's reputation. But outside, George was already planning his next move. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Within 30 minutes of George Strait's departure from the Mercedes-Benz dealership, the video footage from customers' phones was already spreading across social media. The hashtag #RespectForMaria began trending on Twitter, and the story of the country music legend defending his housekeeper was being shared thousands of times across Facebook and Instagram. George sat in his truck in the parking lot of the competing BMW dealership across the street, watching the chaos unfold at the Mercedes location through his rearview mirror. News vans were multiplying, reporters were setting up for live broadcasts, and he could see Carlos Rodriguez through the dealership's windows, frantically speaking on the phone with what appeared to be corporate headquarters. "Tommy, call Maria and ask her to meet us at the BMW dealership. Tell her to bring the documents," George said to his tour manager, his voice calm but determined. "George, are you sure you want to keep this going? The story's already getting huge attention," Tommy replied, scrolling through his phone. "Look at this. It's already on Entertainment Tonight's website." "Good. I want people to see this. I want them to understand that this kind of behavior has consequences." George's voice carried a resolve that Tommy had rarely heard. "Maria deserves better than what she got today, and I'm going to make sure she gets it." 20 minutes later, Maria arrived at the BMW dealership, her eyes red from crying, but her posture straight with determination. She had changed from her navy dress into a simple black outfit, but she carried herself with the same dignity that had sustained her through 25 years of service. "Mr. Strait, I saw the news," she said quietly as she approached his truck. "I never wanted to cause you so much trouble." George got out of the truck and walked over to Maria, placing both hands on her shoulders. "Maria, you listen to me. You didn't cause any trouble. You were doing exactly what I asked you to do, and you were treated with disrespect that no human being should ever have to endure. But the reporters, the cameras, everyone is talking about it now. Let them talk," George said firmly. "Let them talk about respect and dignity and how we treat people who serve others. Let them talk about the fact that character matters more than appearance, and that loyalty should be valued more than prejudice." As they spoke, David Chen, the general manager of the BMW dealership, approached them with a warm smile. He had been watching the news coverage from his office and understood the significance of having George Strait at his location. "Mr. Strait, Ms. Gonzalez, welcome to BMW of San Antonio. I'm David Chen, and I want to personally assure you that you will receive the respect and service that every customer deserves. The contrast between David's approach and the treatment Maria had received that morning was immediately apparent. He addressed her directly, shook her hand with genuine warmth, and spoke to her as an equal rather than looking down on her. Ms. Gonzalez, I understand you're shopping for a luxury vehicle today. I'd be honored to help you find exactly what you're looking for. The simple act of being treated with basic courtesy brought fresh tears to Maria's eyes. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I work for Mr. Strait, and I'm helping him select an anniversary gift for his wife. What a beautiful gesture, David replied. Anniversary gifts are so important, and I can tell that Mr. Strait chose the perfect person to help him with this special purchase. As they walked into the BMW showroom, Maria marveled at the difference in atmosphere. The sales staff was professional but approachable, and several employees greeted her with genuine smiles. David personally escorted them to the luxury SUV section, where he began explaining the features of various models. Now, I know you were originally looking at the Mercedes GLE, but I think you'll find that our X5 offers comparable luxury with some additional features that Mrs. Strait might particularly enjoy. For the next hour, David treated Maria like the VIP customer she was. He explained financing options, discussed delivery schedules, and made sure she understood every aspect of the purchase. George watched with satisfaction as Maria's confidence returned, her expertise in managing details becoming apparent as she asked intelligent questions about features and warranties. The X5 in mineral white with the cognac leather interior would be perfect, Maria said finally, her voice stronger now. Mrs. Strait will love the panoramic sunroof, and the heated seats will be wonderful for those cool Texas evenings. Excellent choice, David replied. Now, Mr. Strait, how would you like to handle the financing? Actually, George said, pulling out his phone, I'd like to make this a double purchase. Maria, I want you to pick out a vehicle for yourself as well. Maria's eyes widened in shock. Mr. Strait, I couldn't possibly. Maria, you've given 25 years of your life to my family. You've sacrificed your own comfort and convenience to make sure we were taken care of. Today you faced humiliation and disrespect while trying to do a favor for me. The least I can do is make sure you have reliable transportation. But, sir, I can't accept such an expensive gift. George's voice became gentle but firm. Maria, you're not just an employee to us. You're family, and family takes care of each other. Besides, that old Honda of yours has been making concerning noises for months. I've been worried about you driving it. With David's help, Maria selected a certified pre-owned BMW X3 in dark blue, a vehicle that was both practical and elegant. As they finalized the paperwork, George made one additional request. David, I want both vehicles delivered to the Strait residence tomorrow morning. The X5 should have a large red bow for the anniversary surprise, and I want both deliveries to be photographed for our social media. Of course, Mr. Strait, we'll make sure everything is perfect. As they completed the transactions, George's phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, record label executives, and fellow musicians who had seen the story. He ignored most of them, but he did answer when he saw the call was from his longtime friend and fellow country star, Alan Jackson. George, I just saw the news. Good for you, man. That housekeeper of yours is lucky to have someone who stands up for her like that. Alan, Maria's not just my housekeeper, she's family. And when someone disrespects your family, you don't just sit back and let it happen. Well, the whole country music community is talking about it. You've got a lot of people who respect what you did today. After hanging up, George turned to Maria, who was still looking overwhelmed by the day's events. Maria, I want you to understand something. What happened today wasn't your fault. and it wasn't something you should have had to endure. But your dignity and strength in the face of that treatment showed everyone the kind of person you are. Mr. Strait, I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me. You just need to promise me that you'll never let anyone make you feel small again. You have worth, Maria. You have value. And anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time or your tears. Meanwhile, back at the Mercedes dealership, the consequences of the morning's events were unfolding rapidly. Brett Thompson had been terminated immediately, his 8-year career with the company ending in disgrace. Carlos Rodriguez was fielding calls from corporate headquarters, trying to explain how a routine customer interaction had turned into a public relations nightmare. The local news stations had picked up the story, and by evening it was being covered on national entertainment shows. The video footage of George's confrontation with Brett was being analyzed by commentators, and the story was being framed as a powerful example of standing up against discrimination. But the real impact was being felt in the community. Other service workers began sharing their own stories of being judged and dismissed based on their appearance or their jobs. The hashtag Respect for Maria had evolved into a broader conversation about dignity, respect, and the value of every person's contribution to society. 3 days later, at the Strait residence, Norma Strait was indeed surprised by the beautiful BMW X5 that appeared in their driveway with a giant red bow. But she was even more moved by the story of how it came to be there, and by the sight of Maria pulling up behind it in her own new BMW. "George," Norma said, tears in her eyes, "in 50 years of marriage, I've never been prouder of you than I am right now." That evening, as George sat in his home studio with his guitar, he began working on a new song. The lyrics came easily, flowing from the emotions of the past few days. Don't judge a book by its cover, don't judge a heart by its clothes. The person serving your coffee has dreams that nobody knows. Respect is earned through character, not through the car that you drive. The most important people are the ones who help others survive. When he finished the song, George knew it would be the centerpiece of his next album. He also knew that Maria's story would continue to inspire people long after the news cycle had moved on to other stories. 6 months later, George received a letter from a young woman in Dallas who had seen the news coverage of Maria's story. She wrote that she had been working as a hotel housekeeper while putting herself through college, and that she had faced similar treatment from guests who looked down on her because of her job. But after seeing how George had stood up for Maria, she had found the courage to report the mistreatment to her supervisor, leading to policy changes that ensured all employees were treated with respect. "Mr. Strait," the letter concluded, "you probably don't remember me, but you changed my life by showing me that every person's dignity matters. Thank you for standing up for people like Maria and people like me." George smiled as he read the letter, knowing that sometimes the most important battles are fought not on stages or in boardrooms, but in the everyday moments when we choose to treat each other with respect and dignity. Maria still works for the Strait family, still maintains their home with the same dedication she has shown for 25 years. But now she drives to work in her BMW, and she carries herself with the confidence that comes from knowing that her worth has been recognized and defended by someone who truly values her. And sometimes, when she's arranging flowers in Norma's favorite vase or preparing for one of their dinner parties, she thinks about that morning at the Mercedes dealership. She thinks about how humiliation can be transformed into triumph, how prejudice can be answered with justice, and how sometimes the most powerful victories are won by those who refuse to let others diminish their dignity. The story of Maria Gonzalez and George Strait became more than just a news story. It became a reminder that in a world that often judges people by their appearance or their station in life, True character is revealed by how we treat those who serve us, and true strength is shown by those who stand up for the dignity of others.